Hi, folks. Welcome. Welcome to MLUX May edition. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you all for joining. If you want to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Hello, Yellow Conference Room. Would you mind turning off your video? Just so that way, yeah, thank you, Yellow Conference Room. But feel free to join us in chat and introduce yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? Help us save everyone else's bandwidth by muting yourself and turning off your video. But we're excited to have you. Here, I'll go first so that way I break the ice. Ta-da, that's who I am. So feel free. I'm always very interested in where everyone is joining from, including you all in Yellow Conference Room. So feel free to post in chat a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you're located, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Hi, Mona. Digital consultant in London. Ooh, what kind of digital consulting do you do? Feel free to respond to chat. Oh, Victoria, hello, one of our guest speakers. Data scientist at Expedia Group based in London. Ooh, we have a bunch of London people. Oh my gosh, all those cool London MLUXers. You guys can all hang out. Working to build ML applications, area of content and recommendations. Recommendations is huge for UX and machine learning. We're so excited to have you speaking today. Mona works on product and data and digital. At and digital. Haha. I was like, and digital. What? Okay. No, at and digital. Awesome. Thanks, Mona, for saying hello. Oh, sweet. Yellow Conference Room is in Dayton, Ohio. Hello. 3 people from Ascend Innovations. Awesome. Looks like a bunch of data science folks joining from Yellow Conference Room. We're so excited to have you. So we have folks in Ohio, we have folks in London. We have Justin, senior at University of Tennessee in the fall. Amazing. Very cool. Congratulations. Which means you're a junior now. So enjoy your summer between junior and senior year. Benas, one of our guest speakers, product designer at Expedia Group, working on personalization. So far, our London count is at least 3, which is pretty cool. Awesome. And we have Clara, a product designer, right outside of DC. Super cool. Oh, fantastic. We have a student from University of Arts London Creative Computing Institute. Victoria and Benas, if you know that group, they are super cool. And I am actually giving a talk there, I think, in a few weeks. Anyways, I'll introduce you guys over email after this. But hello, welcome, UALCCI student. We have Joyce, a UXR based in Austin, Texas. Amazing. Fantastic. And we're just gonna say hello in chat. Please share who you are, what you're up to. Also, this is your chance if you are looking for roles, if you are hiring for roles, if you want to share a cool new project you're working on, now is your chance to kind of share that here. Because I know, we're all remote and digital and we're not doing in-person events. And so we're trying our best to meet each other. Awesome. Welcome to the group, Erin, product designer from Chicago. Amazing. Love that we have a great representation of the Midwest, of East. Oh, Nicole Merrill, conversational AI designer. Oh, awesome. Hi, it's nice to see you. Awesome. Justin's looking for internships and jobs for after he graduates. So feel free to post your LinkedIn or whatever. Awesome. We have machine learning engineers over in New York. Ooh, amazing. Another UALCCI student, UX designer now, studying data science and ML. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay, Benas and Victoria, I'm going to introduce you to the University of Arts London after this because clearly there's a lot of students and people graduating who are interested in this field. So Fantastic. So we'll probably get a couple more folks joining. And thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about who you are and where you're located. Justin, feel free to drop your LinkedIn and promote yourself in the chat if you want jobs and all that stuff too. And this goes for anyone because, I know there's a lot of us who are looking to either get into the field of ML and UX or change roles or hire. And so if you are looking or have cool opportunities, we hopefully can serve as a connection point for all y'all. But awesome, let's get started. I am having screen technical difficulties, so our guest speaker, Benas, has stepped up in many, many different ways, not only to speak and write about his work and everything too, but also to lead our presentation. So thank you for clicking through the slides. We're just going to do a quick welcome, and then we're going to move into our case study, and then we're going to have audience questions. So as they're speaking, feel free to drop some questions in the chat below. But the other thing that I wanted to mention as well is that be sure to follow us on Twitter, MLUX Meetup, and I'll post that in a second. All right, next slide, please. Hello and welcome to the MLUX case study with the Expedia Group. We are going to be talking about machine-centered design. We are so lucky to have Victoria and Benas here today. Victoria leads their data science practice. Benas is a senior UX designer. They work on personalization and recommendations. They're going to talk about how they collaborate, which is one of the big topics that we always get requested here at MLUX is how do I, as a data scientist, work with UX designers or vice versa? So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Next slide, please. I want to quickly just say, hi, I'm Michelle. I'm the organizer and founder of MLUX, but there's a ton of people behind the scenes. In fact, I just saw a couple of y'all join. Hello, thank you. So we wouldn't be possible without so many people who helped us along the way. So thank you to everyone who helped makes it possible. Next slide, please. And I know there's a couple of you who this is your first MLUX. Amazing. I know what you're probably thinking. This seems really cool. I'm so excited that I'm here, but like, what is MLUX? No worries. Next slide. So how we like to think about it is how do we use data science techniques, practices, methods in order to inform and drive UX design decisions? Next slide, please. But also, how do we think about UX design for data intensive experiences? How do we communicate to the user what's exactly happening with their content, how they can control it, and all that kind of stuff too. So that's kind of how we think about ML and UX together. And if you could click to ahead to, please, Benas. Thank you. So I'm also going to be honest, I'm boiling down UX. UX is a huge field. I'm a UX researcher. You could tell by my slides, you probably don't want me designing your app. I do all black and white, but I still think about the design of systems. I think about what is the user experience, and it's all about like, how do we build products for people and how do we build products that people understand and understand kind of what's happening with their data, especially it's important in the field of ML and data science. And then on the other side, I have data. I'm sorry, Victoria and all of our data scientists on the line. I'm boiling down AI, machine learning, data science, even stats, or things that feel intelligent kind of into that data domain, because you know what? Our users don't need to understand exactly if it's ML or AI or whatever it is. It's just powered in a way that feels intelligent. I think that's also important to think about. Awesome. Next slide, please. So we do this, we host collaborative events with data scientists, PMs, designers, everyone in between. We do tech talks and case studies like the one that you're going to see today. And really, we try to foster a sense of community. So I absolutely love, thank you, Victoria, for sharing the careers page, Life at Expedia Group and everything too. If you have roles or you want to connect with more people or chat, feel free to use the Zoom chat to connect with folks. Next slide, please. And also, good news, we're on every social media like ever. So feel free to follow us on YouTube, we're on Meetup, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter. We also have amazing volunteers who write up some of our blog posts and stuff too and put that on our Medium channel. Actually though, Benas wrote up his own Medium post and I'll share with that with you all today. It is fantastic. And so if you also have other things that you want to write about, feel free to, next slide please. contact us. We are humans@mluxsf.com. Sorry, I didn't have the foresight that we would be outside of San Francisco, so the SF is important. But we are global, and we are looking for people, volunteers, no MLUX experience needed. If you see something cool too on Twitter and you're like, hey, MLUX might be interested, please add us, please at MLUX Meetup. And yeah, please also feel free to drop us a line or DM us on Twitter or LinkedIn. Awesome. Next slide, please. Also, please check out our Medium channel and everything too. I encourage you to, I'm gonna mute some folks and also stop people's video and everything too. We're gonna try to save your bandwidth, but please join us on Medium and read through some of our past events as well as our YouTube channel. All of our events are recorded and posted online, and all of our events are free to support feminist AI. Oops, next slide, please. So you may be wondering, oh my gosh, I was able to register today and didn't have to pay anything. Yes, we make all of our events free to allow anyone access regardless of where they are in their career. If you're a student, I love seeing students, welcome. If you are transitioning between jobs, you're trying to get into tech, I remember how expensive it was to constantly have to go to events. Christine, did you want to say anything about Feminist AI?
Yes. Thank you, Michelle. I'm Christine from Feminist AI, and we are a community-run organization. And our focus is to put technology in the hands of makers, researchers, thinkers, learners, and unheard voices to create more accessible AI. So we are so appreciative of everything that comes from MLUX and everything that Michelle has done specifically to help the Feminist AI community. So it's lovely to be here. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Bob. Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. And thank you to all the folks who donated. We don't take the donations here at MLUX. It all goes back to Feminist AI to support community-based learning. Awesome. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, that's our intro about like who we are, what we do, but the whole reason why we came here is to talk today with Victoria and Benas, who I am so excited. Benas actually reached out to me like over a year ago and was all like, I have this like article, I think it's pretty cool, I think you would like it. And of course, I promptly forgot to respond. So I'm sorry if that happens, but I'm so happy that you were so down a year later that we picked it up and we're like, oh my gosh, let's take a look. Oh, this is so cool. And I wonder if you could bring in your data science counterpart. And this is how we looped in Victoria today about how do they work on, as a data scientist and a product designer, machine-centered design. And also the really cool thing is that both of you work on personalization recommendation systems, which is hugely machine driven, but also a huge UX component about what is the user experience around that. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand it over to you all to actually present your slides. And we're so excited to have you today. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Michelle. Great intro. Let me just switch over to the slides. Sweet. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about UX collaboration with data scientists, a really important topic and really something close to my heart. We got me, myself, Benas, senior product designer, and Victoria. You probably know that by now because we kind of did two intros. She's a lead data scientist, and we both work for Expedia Group. So just really quickly, like, what is Expedia Group? It's really like a platform company with a mission to power global travel for everyone, everywhere. And that comes to fruition with these suite of global travel brands that we work for. So we have Expedia, VRBO, Hotels.com, and they're all really trying to make it easier for travelers to discover, plan, book, and manage their trips. So we're trying to make the kind of trip planning experience much better for people who want to go on holidays, basically. And there's a lot that goes into that. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of experience we can create to make that better. And we deliver that by creating inspirational content, providing powerful search tools, personalizing the content that they see, providing relevant recommendations, and many, many, many more things that we do in Expedia and beyond that can help travelers to kind of plan their trips, get trips all together, book them, and enjoy their holidays. And if you look at these examples that I just shared, like a couple of them, you might have guessed that ML plays a huge role in delivering those experiences that make trip planning and booking easier. Well, it really starts with multidisciplinary teams kind of working together to define and create those experiences. So what do we actually want to create? How do we want to solve the problems? And this collaboration is really the catalyst that makes these experiences delightful for end users. And as we look at this collaboration aspect today, we'll focus specifically on the user experience designers and data scientists. But as you probably can imagine, there's many more people that we need to collaborate with to bring these things to life and create these amazing experiences. So first off, I want to just talk about like a little bit, like why have experience design and this ML kind of like machine learning cycle anyway, like project cycle anyway. So, you know, as designers, we do advocate for users, their needs, their problems. And while we bring this unique skill set to the table, I think effectively collaborating with data scientists may be one of the most important things when it comes down to machine learning driven products or features. You know, we're great at like crafting user journeys. We know like UI and like design patterns and all of that stuff. But when you think about machine learning driven products or features, data scientists are the ones that kind of bring them to life and they create the powerful algorithms that power them. So what we really need to do is lean on them and work with them to kind of define that end experience and imagine a great, delightful experience for the end user.
So maybe you're wondering, if you are a machine learning practitioner, why do I need to care about the UI? Because that's like probably the very first thing that doesn't come to your mind. Usually machine learning practitioners are concerned about optimizing a given metric. It might be like a business metric that then you translate to an objective function, then you train your algorithm, and really the UX really doesn't play into your mind. And that might be true for some machine learning practitioners, really depending on the application, because we have applications that just leave behind an API, or they just power some other downstream processes. So in these cases, it's not really that you need to think about the UX. In some other cases, it might be the case that the UX is already there and you really cannot make any changes. So for instance, in this screenshot that we have on the right, if we think about an algorithm that we could design to select the image that we are showing for each property, then we are not really changing the UI based on the image. It's just that we would be selecting different images. So in this scenario, it might not be the case that you need to be thinking about the UX. But obviously, we have a lot of other bigger rank applications that in which we do need to care about the UX experience that we are building. And I think that these are obviously the core of this talk, but mainly where we can get the biggest benefits of the UX collaboration with machine learning. And this might be like applications that already exist. It might be legacy applications that we want to iterate on and we want to evolve, but it might be also completely new use cases that we have never tackled before. So there's really a lot of opportunity here to evolve. In general, what I would suggest for the community is, if you are a new data scientist, or like even an experienced data scientist that has never worked with UX, dealing with your first project, just try to talk to your designer. They will try to guide you through their thought process. And the same, if you are a UX designer trying to work with like a data scientist that has never done UX, just trying to explain and convey what's important in your role, because that's like when you can spark collaboration.
Amazing, exactly. And I think, you know, if we think about this idea of machine learning, if we break it down to something as simple as, you know, you have the input, you have the data, you have the decisioning engine, which is the machine learning, and you have the output, which is predictions that they make. Where does this really kind of like collaboration sit? And in my opinion, like the most value that experienced designers and data scientists in collaboration can bring are these like shoulder stages at the input and output. So, you know, if we think about it, solving the right problem is one of the key things that designers think about. You know, we do a lot of research, we look at existing research, we try to frame the problems. And that's where we can kind of collaborate on the input and data side, like what data do we feed into the algorithms? What do we think about, like, you know, adding capture and stuff like that? And if we look at the other side of things, the output, the prediction, we're all about thinking about how to solve the problem right. Like, what are the ways, like, what are the experience considerations? What are the UI patterns they want to utilize? What's the model saying? So these two areas, I think, where we really kind of power and like add a lot of value from experience design point of view in the collaboration. And these like, you know, aspects of like solving the right problem and solving the problem right might not be like too unfamiliar for you. because it really relates well to the double diamond process that most of designers are quite familiar with and follow as their like go-to, process to design experiences. So you go through stages like immersing in the problem space, understanding what's going on, talking to your users. Then you frame what one problem that you want to solve. Think about a bunch of ideas that could solve that problem, and then you narrow down to one, and you deliver something at the end, and you always iterate as well. So you have the solving the right problem thing here again, and solving the problem right. And if you look at these key areas for collaboration, I picked out a couple for today. So there's a bunch of different things and different kind of like areas that you can collaborate on throughout the whole process. But for today, I picked out two. So one is in ideation, which is defining data and model needs. And one is in delivery stage, adapting experience and evaluating the model output. So we're going to focus on them too and shed a bit more light in like how does that work in practice and talk about the process in a bit more detail. So first off, let's look at the ideation example. So as I just mentioned, it's all about defining data and model needs. And there's a lot of opportunities here. So one is really thinking about additional data needs and potential data capture patterns in the UI. That's something you might want to start collaborating on and work with data scientists to think about. Like, do we need to capture any more data? What we already capture in the UI? And kind of group things together and decide with data scientists what's important. In addition, you can look to scope which model might be the best for your solution and work with data scientists to define that. How complex should the model be? Do we need to explain it? What's the right approach here for this experience they want to create? So in ideation stage, there's plenty of opportunities here. And finally, that you can also lean on data scientists to kind of get early data analysis on the problem space. So they can pull in if we have data already, if we have an existing feature we want to iterate on, we might have a big data pool that we can just look up, do some modeling, do some analysis, and then you can use that to guide your design thinking.
So looking from the data science side, if you think about the initial stages when you are building a new machine learning application, usually you start defining your business objectives, and then you move on to data understanding and data processing needs. So usually in this part of the process, you start with an exploratory data analysis. When you start looking at the data, how does the data look like? What is the data telling me? And you start creating plots, generally a frequency histograms, like box plots, and all this kind of very nice visualizations that help you understand the data. And one key thing that is very useful to do at this point is talking to your product and designer group just to see whether the data that you're saying, the assumptions that you're making for your problem is really what you already have. And specifically when you are looking at data ranges, or data distributions, having a look at the UI, are these valid values that we want to consider, or this is an outlier? It might be a data capture problem here that you might not have taken into consideration. So being able to constrain and focus your data needs is something that is very important. And at this stage, there are other things that you might be able to pick up. It might be the case that there might be a disconnect between your data capture solution and the UI that you are presenting to your end user. So when you are modeling a problem, you definitely want to capture this as you build your data and evolve your process. And moving on to the modeling phase, this is something where the UI still plays a great role. So in the initial stages of your project, it might be the case that you still haven't even focused which kind of machine learning solution you want to build. So in a lot of cases, it might not be still clear that you have a regression problem or a classification problem, or if you're building a classification problem, how many classes should I deal with? So looking at the UI might give you some intuitions about how your solution could be played and which kind of a machine learning solution might be more appropriate for this case. And even in this, if you're thinking about your first machine learning model, you might be thinking about iterating and creating your second version, your third version. So at this stage, it's still a good idea to just think about how is this UX going to evolve, and just have a look maybe at several designs that might be proposed at this stage, because you might have already several user needs that are trying to be captured. So in that way, you can try to decide on a modeling approach that might not be ideal maybe for the first MVP, but might allow you to evolve over time. So that's mainly what it can be, UX can be bringing you to decide on your model. But then once you start building your model, the UX also starts giving you hints about what might be relevant to your end users. So for instance, in this screenshot, if I were to think, okay, which could be important features for this model? Well, I at least can see that I have like some items that are highlighted in green compared to the homogeneous design that we might have here. So if this has a different color, maybe this is very important. Or the items that we have in red, well, it's in red, so probably this is something that I might need to think about. How can I capture this data? How can I incorporate this data into the model? And again, things that appear at the top of the list, things that appear in bold letters, they are like providing you some paths about, okay, which are features that I can like add, that I can experiment, that I can bring like a boost of performance for my ultimate objective function.
Sweet. So that's looking at the ideation stage, a couple of like examples and like things you might want to consider. Now let's look at the delivery stage. And now that you have like, you know, ideas kind of defined and you're pursuing one opportunity, how can we collaborate with data scientists here? So when it comes to delivery, there's an opportunity to work and understand the model output and adapt proposed designs based on that. So if I'm building a design, I'm creating an experience, and then we have in parallel like a model that's being built. Once we have a model ready, there's a massive opportunity to look at like, what are the predictions? Is the model like showing one option or always predicting one option? Is the range really broad? What's the precision? What's the recall? Do we need to like change the UI based on that? And we can kind of like work like that. And equally, I think data scientists can work with designers to evaluate their model if it's addressing those refined designs and if it's achieving the intended outcome. So it's almost like a back and forth that we can kind of do.
So again, when we look from the data science process, once you have built the model, you need to start thinking about how you're going to evaluate this model. And usually, well, you have your loss function that you're using to train your model, but that's not really the kind of function that you would want to use ultimately to evaluate. So depending on your kind of model, you might be looking at accuracy, root mean square error, or any other kind of metrics. And sometimes these metrics are not fully defined. So in this slide, I have an example of like two metrics that are commonly used in the recommendations space, which are the recall metric and the precision metric. And for people who are not familiar with them, I'm going to try to give you an intuition about what these two metrics mean. So for the recall metric, what we are trying to measure is how many relevant items in our recommendation problems have we gotten correct. So we get a fixed list. We need to define the size of this list and say, okay, out of these maybe 5 elements, we got like 2 rights or 3 rights. While precision is another metric that tries to look at how accurate we are when we are making these predictions. So what precision is trying to do is just saying, oh, you're giving me a list of 2 or 3 items, but you want the 2 or 3 items that you give me to be as correct as possible. And if you give me a longer list, then I'm going to penalize you if not all these items that you're giving me are accurate. So you can see that these 2 metrics mean different things. So if we have like 2 UX, like on the right-hand side, we can see the first one is a drop-down list with 6 elements, and the second one is like a carousel with 3 elements. So one thing that stands out at the very beginning when you look at these 2 of them is that in the first one, we want the parameter K of the precision at K or the recall at K metrics to be 6 in the first case and 3 on the second case. But then if we look at, okay, is there like a metric that we prefer from precision or compared to recall? Probably we would want to select a recall metric for the second UI, because in this case, we're always going to have 3 elements. So having like 3 elements with like 2 that might not be correct is not really something that we would want to penalize. While in the other case, the drop-down list, since we might have a different length, and this doesn't sit like strange to any end user, we might want to prefer to evaluate our model with the precision at K metric, because since we can vary the length very easily, it might be worth having an algorithm that is much better at selecting items that are actually relevant to the end user. But when we evaluate models, we not only look at the machine learning algorithm performance, we also do a post-hoc analysis, which is the next step that we would always make in these cases. Usually when we do this post-modeling analysis, we are generally looking at business metrics. So the business metrics is like the ultimate metric that the business might be interested in. And usually we try to make as correlated the business metric versus our machine learning objective. But in some other cases, what we might find is that we have some other metrics that we might not have initially considered for our use cases. So in this example that I have here is like very similar to the previous example. We have a list of destinations that we might be recommending for travelers, and we might have like 6 elements that we are showing. But we can say that we are adding the images of these destinations, just trying to promote a nice visualization of what kind of experience the traveler might get when they arrive at these destinations. If you look at the example on the left-hand side, this could be like the ideal experience with all the destinations, like having a proper image and how we can relate to that. While on the right-hand side, maybe we have like destinations that are very fine-grained, that are very small. It can be a small neighborhood, and we might not have an image in our database just to display this to travelers. So knowing which kind of UI you're going to use your algorithms for, it might be very relevant in how you select your algorithms, because if your algorithm is picking a lot of tail destinations that don't have images with them, we might either need to select another algorithm that maybe doesn't have such a high recall, but might create a better experience for the end user compared to others. And obviously you can always search for new images and so on and so forth, but still when you think about algorithms, there might be other things in the UI that you need to consider.
Amazing. So we talked about ideation and delivery, and like how does UX and data science process could look like, diving into some data science examples. I want to also give some examples around collaboration and how does that look like when we look at defining data and model needs. So this is one of the key areas that I talked about previously in the ideation stage. And I wanted to highlight a couple of examples around data capture that can support future model iterations, and then look at model decisioning and how can then help UX and how UX can think about different models as well. So first off, like additional data capture. So this example is really looking at a single hotel recommendation. Let's say someone has already looked at a few hotels and we're just recommending an additional option they might want to consider. Really basic example. But what I want to highlight here is that we have 2 options. One at the top has some additional capture, which is basically dismissing that recommended option. And then the one at the bottom does not have that. Ultimately, both of these options on the left are not what the customer wants to see. What they really actually are interested in is the Mountain View Hotel. So we need to get to that point and we need to predict that in the correct fashion. So if we do look at the one at the bottom, the Hotel Paradise without no data capture, to get to the right prediction, we would need to look at the implicit signals and really kind of lean on them to iterate on our model. So implicit signals would be anything from you click on this recommendation, you view details, you come back to it, then you maybe do a bit more clicking, and then in the end, you do decide to book Hotel Paradise, and that's how we can stitch all these implicit data signals together to say, okay, was this right? Was this wrong? Did we make the right prediction? But if we do something quite simple as adding an option to dismiss at the top, we can really fast forward that and just get an explicit signal of, yes, I don't like this recommendation. I don't want to see it. Next time around, we'll predict Mountain View Hotel. And that's as simple as that. We obviously would use both like implicit and explicit to train our models and update them. But this just shows like how as UX, we can kind of help, or it can kind of help data scientists and improve their models with these like additional data capture patterns. And when it comes to model choice, again, sometimes we might want to highlight feature importance and have a model that allows us to do that, because we already know that for the end user, explainability and knowing that this recommendation is served for this reason really helps to build trust and prevent users from being confused on why they're seeing certain recommendations. So we have some, like for example, in Expedia, we have existing research that's the case. And we know that that's really important to like build trust with our brand and not like, confuse our customers on why we're recommending things. So if we look at model choices, the one at the top, we might have a model that we didn't consider explainability at all. We didn't like look at feature importance. And we have something along the lines of recommended for you as a copy at the top of recommendation carousel. A customer might come in and think, well, why is it recommended for me? Expedia doesn't know anything about me. Like, I'm an individual. Like, what is this creepy like data collection? People can be like that. And in travel, it's so personal. You don't want to just kind of show options left, right, and center and confuse people. But if we have something along the lines of recommended hotels for review, that might alleviate some of those concerns. So a model with some feature explainability or feature importance could allow us to do that. So we know that the model is predicting these recommendations based on their past views. For example, they viewed certain hotels, all of them had a nice view in common. And then we make a recommendation list and say, hey, here's some recommended hotels with a view. And we kind of adapt the copy and our users are happy. But this also works both ways. So sometimes it's not like, we don't have a luxury of like just picking one or the other and, doing like, okay, let's explain all our models. That takes effort as well. So in some cases, we can't explain it, and we should kind of like work with data scientists to understand that this model will be like, let's say, neural network, which is kind of hard to explain, and we'll just have to kind of accept that. So then from the UX point of view, you can start thinking around like, where do we present this option? Like, if it's a carousel of recommended hotels, maybe we don't always show it. Maybe we show it when we have a really strong signal that the customer needs recommendations, and we can kind of adapt the UI, UX, and copy and content and everything based around the knowledge that the model will not be as explainable as it could be. So again, we talked about a lot of different things. So we talked about where does UX and data science collaborate together across the process. We showed some examples. We looked a bit deeper into the data science process as well. But to enable this better collaboration and to have these more possibilities for input on data and model decisions, and have the ability to co-create end user experience, data scientists, just like your engineers and your product managers, should be part of that core product team. So this really helps to accelerate and enable better collaboration, and not having them just like a simply like a stakeholder who provide feedback can really help. But I know that's not always the reality. And, often you don't have data science resources. It's, it can be a bit difficult to achieve that in some organizations if the data science team is not as mature, and embedding a data scientist into a product team can be costly. So I think in these situations, there's still lots of room to create the foundations for good collaboration. And I think in these scenarios, you can just focus more on strong project kickoffs. So really focusing on the problems that you're trying to solve, aligning on like the expected outcomes, and really kind of focusing time there. And then at the end, coming back and evaluating the end user experience together. So really having that strong beginning and then coming back together at the end to evaluate like, what is the model predicting? What's our UX looking like? And kind of collaborate as we just spoke about. And that kind of brings us to the end. So just kind of summarize, as we said, collaboration with data scientists is a really important skill for experienced designers. And it really helps to kind of like create effective outcomes for valuable experiences for the end user. And there are a number of opportunities to work with data scientists throughout project lifecycle. So today we only looked at key areas and the ideation and delivery phase, but there's many more. So we have framing the problem. We also have iterations. There's more thinking there. So we also looked at a couple of examples. Victoria presented some considerations in the kind of data science side. And just to kind of wrap it all up and just to say, and I mentioned this just now, but all this can happen every data scientist as is a core member of the team or is at least involved in the early stages of the process if resources are limited. And that's it. And before we end, I'm gonna do a shameless plug. So as Michelle mentioned, I wrote like an article around core skills that you have to start like designing machine learning powered experiences, which was focused just on that and kind of touches on collaboration with data scientists. That's already out. Just want to say that next up, I'm going to try and write another article series, which is collaboration with data scientists, which will be part 2. And this will basically be the same content that we looked at today, but I'm hoping to include a bit more detail. I have a process chart that I want to kind of showcase as well, and I'll be writing that soon, and that's to come. So just kind of like share that. And that said, we can jump to Q&A.
Woo, thank you. I know probably, I mean, we have 40 of our closest friends on the line, and I'm sure they're all clapping too. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you're seeing in the chat too, folks are saying thank you. Would you mind going to the MLUX slides again, and we can start the Q&A? And I think there's a slide where it's just like your faces so everyone can see who you are. Ooh, ah, thank you. Okay, so couple things. Just like, I thought this was an amazing talk. Like you guys did such a great job explaining like with tangible examples of like how UI can actually affect ML metrics, how UX can actually have a huge role in changing what types of features and like problems the ML team actually addresses, but also vice versa. Like how can ML kind of explain trends in data and the UX team kind of complement that on like not just what's happening, but why it's happening. And I know too, we had a couple questions. So Monica, I know that you have your hand raised, but how we're going to do questions is that you're going to put them in chat and I'm going to moderate them. So to kick us off, I would love to know a little bit about like, what does a day in the life for each of you look like? Like, are you like physically sitting next to each other? Are you like, I imagine this was such a great talk. You're just like swiveling your chair around and being all like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. But like, how does that actually work?
Yeah, of course I can start. So me and Victoria, like these days, we're kind of like not working on some features that like right now, but back in the day, we worked really closely on some of the recommendation models. And I think day in life would look like pretty similar to like, you know, how you would see you working with, if you're a UX designer and you work with product managers, it would be kind of close to that. So yeah, you would just kind of have chats, stand-ups, you'd be there, you know, talking to them all the time, sharing different things, kind of talking about like, you know, what's happening, what do we need to change, maybe like requesting a data analysis or something like that. So it'd be really cool and collaborative kind of experience. These days we're kind of in touch, so we have like some meetups where we kind of look at, you know, existing work and flight, and we kind of talk about relevant use cases. So we also kind of like collaborate like that.
Yeah, what I would add to that is like I generally, when I'm trying to give an update to like the overall team, I try to involve not only like the product managers, but also UX people and engineering teams, because usually that gives like everyone a bit of a view about what's important, what might be impacting them. And usually it's I get a lot of questions during those exchanges. Oh, how does the model behave in this scenario? Can the model do this? Can the model do that? And then obviously we have like online collaboration tools where I can get a lot of questions or like reminders from UX people like, oh, from the user research, this is very important. Have you looked at how can this be included in the model? So this could be like, this is something that happens like as you progress with the projects.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that and demystifying it and everything too. I don't know. I know sometimes some folks are like, wait, oh my gosh, talking to a data scientist, like where do they even come in the project? Like we already have agile and like all these other methods, but like it kind of just sounds like treat them like a normal coworker. And as a data scientist, turn to you or UXer, as a UXer, turn to your data scientist. I love it. I also live tweeted that around, just talk to each other. Love it. Okay, so we have a question here around like, do you have any best practices on the UX and UI side to make sure that our designs aren't adding unnecessary bias or maybe even noise into the data collection? It sounds like you kind of have a couple of examples on that.
Victoria, do you want to go first?
I mean, I think that in terms of when we talk about data biases, definitely it's a very difficult topic because there are a lot of types of biases that you can add into the data. So it's like in terms of UI, you can start with like position bias, how to display the order of the things that you have, like are displaying, and then obviously the style. That usually has a less impact on the position bias, but you can also have like bias in terms of like how your data collection process goes. Maybe you have like some browsers where like the data collection is a bit like less complete. So I think that at least from the data side, you need to understand as much as possible as you can from how the UI looks like. If it's a stable UI, well, you can actually make like hard rules in your data if you are doing a lot of A/B tests during the time. So you can have changing UIs, trying to see if there are massive differences between like different types of the UI might be helpful just to understand whether there's like a shift in different group patterns.
Yeah, I want to add from the UX point of view, I think like being aware of those biases and like the types of biases is probably the key thing. So you know, like Victoria mentioned position bias, and there's many more. I think there's like, you know, plenty of, like, I think there's probably a 5, 10, like there's loads of different biases, and especially like in, you know, different like apps and different kind of like, you know, platforms, there might be like different biases that you have. And as long as you're aware that, okay, like this listing is at the top, and there is definitely going to be position bias. So then when you look at these metrics, then you know that there's going to be a bias towards, you know, showing stuff at the top, and the algorithm will kind of like bias towards that. So as you're creating these experiences, you can think, okay, well, if I do the same thing here as well, like if I put something at the top here as well, instead of like having showing like a list of options, perhaps I'm just kind of like coming up with different examples, then you kind of can see, okay, like this is going to be a bit biased, this won't be as biased. So just being aware of like the types, I think can really help. And then you can kind of like have that lens as you look at the experience and, you know, think about the model outputs.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And I can imagine too, like there's like frequency bias and everything too, of like, oh, the most booked hotel is gonna come up like the most because it fits so many people. And so like, how do you balance that? And it has real world implications. So thank you for answering that and sharing a little about your thought process. Okay, we have another question here too around, you had talked about some of the, you know, how to surface explainable like UX copy and everything too, about like, why are you receiving this recommendation? But can you explain a little bit more about any other best practices or tips you have around like those types of explainable models that you all use? Benas, I want to compliment you too. I think you did a great job on neural networks because sometimes it's very confusing and you're like, wait, what exactly is going on? And it sounds like you're kind of looking at the data and then like as a human labeling it. But sorry, Victoria, I saw you came off mute.
No, I was going to answer this question because for me, it's like, this is like one of my biggest questions when I'm thinking about the UX, because I always get from the UX designers, oh, how can we explain how the model has making this prediction? And for me, unfortunately, it's still an unsolved question. So there are a lot of tools that we try to use. So for people who might be familiar, a bit familiar with the interpretable AI world, we have things like Lime or Shapley values that we can use for explanations. And one thing about for instance, like Shapley values are generally model agnostic, so we can try to use them with different types of model, including neural networks. Especially in some fields where you might have like a classification regression problems, they might work very well and you can like get a sense of the features, but then you have like the second problem as well. When you work with Shapley values, it's like maybe you have like a negative importance of one of the features, a positive importance of the other features. So just trying to design a whole process of how you connect this end to end so you can create a UI that conveys these values, it's still something that we are trying to improve and build on. I'm sorry that is not the perfect answer, but if you have like a process that does this like really well, I would be very, very interested in hearing about how you do this.
Yeah, it's not easy, is it? But we always ask for it. We always ask for it. Like I think, especially in travel, like, in this kind of space that we work in, it's super important. I'm sure it's important like elsewhere as well. Like it's a big thing for user experience to be able to explain why certain things are happening. But I think like travel is so personal, and then there's so many different attributes you're thinking about, like where's the hotel, who I'm going with, what time of day, and trying to explain like, as things are like being recommended or showcased to you is super important. So we always lean to our data scientists and annoy them with our question of like, can we explain it?
Awesome. Thank you so much for kind of painting that picture for us. And also too, yes, if you find a way to make explainable models, Victoria and Benas, let me know, because I'm sure that can help so many other people. What I'm hearing though, and what I think is a really cool takeaway is like, sometimes you might just have to do an editorialization about like, well, what types of things are kind of occurring, and maybe you might run a couple of examples and be like, oh wait, this seems like it's a really good for mountain views or with a pool or something like that. Awesome. So there is a question too. We have touched on the UX design side, we've touched on the ML side, but what about UX researchers or product managers or other engineers? How do they kind of fit into the fold, and what does that kind of look like for your process?
I'm happy to go first. So yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, like we also collaborate with them. Like it's a huge part of like, this multidisciplinary team bringing these experiences to life. And I think actually me and Victoria presented this morning to her team. It's a little like a trial run, but I think this came up as well, and it was really interesting, like talking about the user research in particular, and like, how do we kind of test these things? And I've had like interesting experiences where, you want to test the algorithm output, but it's so like targeted to the user. And when you have participants coming in, you don't know what their preferences are. Like, how do you kind of like simulate that? So there's like things of like, you can do Wizard of Oz study where you do like change things live and pretend that you're like an algorithm. But there's other things that we've done in the past where, especially from research side, we kind of recruited people with certain destinations in mind, and then we had like samples of like, data that we kind of would run the algorithm through for those destinations and like pick like, let's say, a set of recommendations, and then that becomes more relevant to them. It's a really big topic, and I think, it can be challenging with ML and personalization and kind of like simulating these outputs. And then with like product managers, like, of course, like, we work, at least me, I work with them like hand in hand, and, they think about like, the tech pipelines and like how to kind of enable these, algorithms into the experience and all those things. So we work really closely with them as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit. Well, another question that I had, maybe more towards Victoria, if you have any best practices on this. Okay, so there can often be so much enthusiasm for like AI from product teams and management. I know I've definitely heard this too, where it's like, oh yeah, ML, like put ML on it, like it'll be great. How do you find that you can kind of reframe this in a more human-centered way? And like, do you have any tips or best practices, especially for data science teams?
Yeah, so in my case, I would always start with trying to explain what are machine learning algorithms, what they can achieve, and what they can do for the problem at hand. So I think that a lot of people, and especially because machine learning has had a lot of attention in the last years, they think, oh, machine learning is magic. Machine learning can do everything for you. And usually that's not the case, unfortunately, because there are a lot of problems that come with developing machine learning applications. So for people who work with me, who know me, they know that I'm always just saying, I don't have the data is not correct, we need more data. So just being able to convey this idea of like, okay, we need this data. Why do we need this data? And once we get this data, we would be able to do X, or we would be able to do Y. And then being able to explain, if we have the ideal algorithm would do this thing. And in some cases, especially for people who are not that familiar with machine learning, this helps a lot, especially this idea of the ideal algorithm, because obviously your algorithm is not going to be perfect. And if you're getting like close to 100% accuracy, please check your data, please check your process, because it's either a very easy problem, which probably you can even like solve with a business rules or something similar, or probably there's something wrong. Most of the times when I get this, it's probably my code that is wrong. But generally, it's like if your model is going to have errors, your model is not going to be the ideal model. So if you go to the ideal model and you convey this to other people, they would be able to understand how your model would perform in the best case scenario. Obviously, worst case scenario, this is going to be completely random. They are not going to add value, but at least it helps them build their thought process about what they can achieve and what they can do with machine learning.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for explaining that and everything too. And yes, I totally agree. One of my favorite phrases is like, how are we currently solving this without machine learning though? Is that like, that could actually still be a really good solution. Awesome. So we have 5 more minutes left. I'm gonna ask a final wrap-up question for the both of you. So we have like 40 plus folks on the line who are data scientists, ML engineers. We have a ton of UXers, researchers, product managers, students. What would be one piece of advice or guidance you want all of us to take away today? And I know on the West Coast and Pacific time, I'm just starting my day. So like, what do you want me to go to my team stand-ups and like distract the entire stand-up and be like, oh my God, guys, I heard this really great fact. I have to tell you. Yes, what is your one piece of advice or guidance for us?
I'll go first. My advice is, and I think you tweeted that, is just talk to people, really. I think, if you have this at hand, like you've seen this talk and then you have a problem where like maybe UX is not collaborating as well with data scientists as you wanted to, you show them this, talk to them. And I think, that can open a lot of doors. And all of this stuff happened like, in Expedia, and like, how we started collaborating more was just through talking and like working together and like exchanging like what we do and like seeing where we can collaborate. So it's a very organic process, but talking really helps.
Yeah, from my side, I think it's going to be like listen to what other people are telling you, because usually they have like very good reasons about why they are explaining something. So don't feel afraid of ask questions about like, oh, why is that? Or why is this important? And because this can really give you insights for any other like a field that you might not be familiar with, and even like the fields that you are familiar with. If we look at like specifically more like a data advice, like if you're a data practitioner, what are the kind of things that you would recommend anyone to start looking at? I think one very valuable piece of advice that I got like early in my career is like, try to look at this application from the end user perspective. So it's like at Expedia Group, that means browse the website, just trying to try to do the actions that you are trying to change the experience for. But it can happen like if you are like, I don't know, working on like a physical store application, go to the store, just walk through the store. And really that helps you to better understand data and just better understand how your algorithms would be used. So definitely this is something that I think has helped me a lot in my career, avoided me making a lot of mistakes and improve the final result.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think we could all use a heavy dose of what our users think of this, and just try it. And your models don't exist in a vacuum, and like, what is their experience? Thank you both so much for your time today and everything too. Actually, Benas, can I ask you to move forward in the slides? Oh yes, thank you to all the folks who support Feminist AI through your ticket donation. Thank you. If this is of interest, let me know, reach out. But thank you to our speakers for coming in today, to also your teams who have helped make all of these things possible. I know you both, as you both are talking about collaboration, there's a lot of folks who actually have to engineer it and put it together. So thank you to all of them for documenting that and creating really cool experiences that we can all learn from. Thank you to all of our volunteers who make this possible, but also thank you to all the folks who joined today, because we wouldn't be able to host events without you. It would just be me, Victoria, and Benas just kind of chit-chatting. And I mean, that sounds wonderful and lovely. But thank you all for showing up. And if any of you have a topic that you'd like to speak on to, like I mentioned, Benas actually just reached out to me and was like, I have something cool I want to share. And so please reach out to us, humans@mluxsf.com. But yes, thank you everyone so much for joining today.